Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Financial Literacy webinars presented by Gainbridge, a digital platform of financial products and member of Group 1001, an insurance holding company. My name is Cheryl Lala Chavez, and I'm joined every month by Lauren Williams, a four-time Olympian and certified financial planner. In each one of our episodes, we'll also have a Parity Athlete Ambassador. This month, we welcome Mady Richards, professional long jumper and USC alum. Welcome to the two of you.
Hi.
Great to have you. So today we're having a conversation on managing debt. As athletes, we have to juggle fluctuating income, multiple jobs, home life, all of it, right? So Lauren, what are the different types of debt and how much debt is too much?
Yeah, so, some people like to say that there's good debt and bad debt. I'm a person who thinks there's debt and there's bad debt. Because ultimately you owe someone money and you're being charged something for owing them money. So you're going to pay them back not just what you owe them, but a little bit above and beyond that. And that's what people refer to as interest. So when you think of, the normal types of debt, there's like a car payment, a mortgage, sometimes student loan payments, things like that. And then when we think about what bad debt is, that is, medical debt that you might have to have had to charge in order to pay a medical bill that usually has a much higher interest rate. Credit card debt. So that's what we call revolving debt. And on a monthly basis, you're going to be charged interest. And if you make small enough a payment, you're going to be charged interest on your interest. So that's not a good situation at all. And then there's a few other different ways that you can borrow personal loans and things like that, where you're taking on various types of debt. But those are the kind of basics as giving you a rundown.
Gotcha. And so Mady, as an athlete, have you heard these terms like good debt, bad debt, revolving debt? And what are some things that maybe have put you into debt?
Yeah, so I hadn't really heard, the term good debt necessarily. I was reading like the little Gainbridge information previously, and I think debt to me has always had like this negative connotation, even if it is, good debt where you're going to get a good return on your investment, like for school or that type of situation. I am very stressed about debt, I would say. So I'm pretty like financially conservative and try not to have a lot of debt. I have a car payment, so there's debt right there. And then I'm applying to physician assistant programs in this next cycle in April. So that's going to be a large debt that I'm going to have in the future. So I think right now I'm just trying to minimize any, extra expenditures and not have to have, interest on any payments right now, since that's going to be a cloud looming over my head in the next year.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, Mady, too, about, like not having heard of the term good versus bad and just thinking of it as like, oh, it's all bad. That's kind of why I refer to it as debt versus bad debt. But I think why they use the term good debt is because they like to think of, like you said, the thing that you're investing in. So you're investing in your education, but you're not able to pay for it all at one time. And if you delay it until you were able to pay for it, it might take you too long. And, there's tons of missed opportunities along the way. Same sort of thing with a house. Generally, mortgages are 30 years and you pay for it over a very long period of time. But if you can come up with a down payment, you can have that place and pay for it over 30 years, live in it, during your life, which is a pretty good chunk of your life if you live in a house for 30 years. And so that's where it's like the debt is allowing you to be able to do something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do that has some sort of benefit to you. We just need to be careful about, like you said, it being like a fancy pair of shoes and it has a very short benefit to you, but also costs you a lot over the long term. So, yeah.
Yeah, Lauren, I know we've talked about this concept before, but let's revisit it again, the 50-30-20 rule and how that helps an athlete manage their debt.
Yeah, so 50-30-20 rule is basically you have a budget. So let's just say, make the math nice and round, $1,000 a month is what's coming in. 50% of that can be used for your obligations. So obligations being like keeping a roof over your head, your rent, your utilities, your cell phone bill, that has become more of a necessity over the years. That used to be something that was more discretionary on the front end. But, the main kind of things that you need to take care of, that might include your student loan debt, minimum payment. So whatever your obligations are, 500 in my example goes toward that. And that's where you want to try to stay inside that range. The next piece of the puzzle would be 30% of your income. And that usually goes to the fun part of life. So eating out, going to the movies, hanging out with friends, getting your hair done, getting your nails done, all the kind of variable discretionary things that make up, life, because life is lifing. And so you want to kind of keep that between the $300 mark in my example, if you have $1,000, or 30% of your income. So for every $1,000 you have coming in, you can spend $300 of it on fun stuff. And this is where people kind of sometimes get in trouble because they eat a lot and they eat out a lot, and the Uber Eats, doubles up your cost, and it adds to that variable area, and it's really hard to keep control of it. Which leads me to that last little part, which is the 20%. You should be saving 20% of whatever it is that you bring in. So my example, we got $1,000, 500 went to our bills, 300 went to having a good time, and then $200 or 20% of your income went to saving. So that could be saving for your emergency fund, saving for retirement, saving for some sort of life goal if there's something coming up. But you definitely want to be thinking about the long-term goals. And if you haven't had an emergency fund yet, you first want to get that conquered. But 20% of your income should be going to savings. And generally people's savings rate are way below that. So that's a short breakdown of the 50-30-20 rule.
Gotcha. And so Mady, have you heard of this rule before? And do you use something like this to manage debt?
Yeah, so I actually have heard of 50-30-20, and I actually do use it. Have like my little Excel spreadsheet that I try to stay on track, I guess. I'm not perfect by any means. Like I'll miss a week and then I'm at the end of the month, like, oh shoot, let me go through my statement and like see what I actually spent on different things. But yeah, I've tried to be more just aware of expenses. One, everything's so much more expensive now. So, especially with that, it's like, okay, things being way more expensive, you kind of have to keep a better handle on what you're spending. And then I just think too, with like the looming future, which I'm very excited for, but just like of applying to a graduate program. And, I'm not going to be able to work while I'm in PA school, right? It's like my savings needs to be very high during that time so that I'm not taking out, just the student loans, but also like cost of living loans, which have higher interest. And I know I'm going to have to be on a tighter budget when I'm in school. So I'm trying to do my best now to kind of have a little like nest egg, if you will. And it is hard, like TikTok is not the best thing. Like some 17-year-old girls convincing me on TikTok I need these Lululemon pants or like, some makeup. And I'm just like, okay, like, do I really actually need this? So it is like, that like tug of war with yourself to try to manage, like, is this actually a need? Probably not. And if it's not a need, let me put that money away and save it for something that's going to be more important down the road.
Yeah, so many athletes have not had to deal with student loan debt because they're scholarship athletes. But when you go for that second degree, you're generally out of school and it's much more expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, I completely know where you're coming from with the, like, woo, I got to take on this debt, but also like, it's going to allow me to be able to do things in the future. The one thing I would say is that it's really important as we have a conversation about debt to have a strategy that is specific to you with your student loan debt. Because when you take on federal student loan debt, there's a lot of different options available. So there's like a standard repayment plan, an extended, a graduated, income-driven repayment plans, and the list goes on and on and on, and it can get a little confusing. But what you don't want to do is whatever your friend's doing. Oh, my friends, got this great rate and they refinance their loan, so I'm going to go get a great rate and refinance my loans as well. This is where you don't want to take TikTok advice as well. Yeah. That's sometimes where that kind of stuff comes from. Is like, oh, I heard about this and I want to be responsible, so let me do it. You need to really hone in on what is the appropriate thing for you to be able to pay back your loans. And I think you're doing really great already on the front end. It's like, let me borrow as little as possible. Let me have a nest egg so that I'm not running up my student loan debt, because some people just borrow everything and they're like, I'll worry about it later. And then later comes and you're like, oh man, what did I do? So getting a customized plan that is specific to you is a key piece of managing student loan debt, because it could be something that you're managing over the next 10, 15, even up to 25 years, depending on how much you're borrowing and what your next income is going to be.
Okay, advice taken. No TikTok financial advice for student loan debt. Lauren, can you break down some of the strategies when it comes to kind of managing debt? I know there's the avalanche and the snowball methods. What are those things?
Yeah, so they're both really popular. Quick Google search, if you type in like paying down debt, would lead you to probably these two things first, and then some other kind of like more obscure things. But the avalanche is basically saying, I'm going to pay based on the highest interest rate first. So let's say you have three different debts. One is a 10% interest rate, one's 5%, and one's 3%. The avalanche says, if I pay the minimum payment on the 5% and the 3%, and I pay as much as I possibly can. So let's say I can do an extra $100 a month on the 10%, I'm doing the most cost-effective thing. So I finish off the 10% one, I save myself as much money as possible on interest by paying the highest interest rate first. And then I moved on to the second one, which was the 5%. And then once I finished that, I moved on to the third one, which was the 3%. And you kind of pick up those monthly payments that you were using for the other ones and apply it to the next one. So that is how the avalanche works. On the other hand, we have the snowball, where you go with the smallest balance and then you work your way up. And so the reason people like the snowball is because it gives you kind of like an endorphin boost when you pay something off. So let's say you've got a $1,500 loan, a $5,000 loan, and a $10,000 loan. Well, the $10,000 loan might have the highest interest rate, and it is going to be most cost effective to pay off the one with the highest interest rate. But guess what? It's probably going to take you a while if you can only pay $50 a month or even $500 a month toward that $10,000, right? And so it's like you just get tired and you get what we call debt fatigue by trying to pay off that $10,000. Whereas you could take your same $500 a month, 3 months from now, you're done with the $1,500 loan. You're like, woohoo, go me, go me. And then you take that $500 and you apply it to that 5,000 one, along with whatever you're already paying, and you keep moving up. So you kind of get these endorphin boosts as you conquer a little one and you move up to the next larger one. So it's completely up to you which one you want to do, whether you want to choose the avalanche or the snowball. The big piece of the puzzle is that the avalanche is going to be more cost effective, whereas the snowball is going to allow you to have those good wins and help you get rid of some of the things and kind of simplify your life sooner rather than later.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And so a lot of it really does sound like budgeting and kind of understanding, where you are each month. And Mady, you've mentioned you have your Excel spreadsheets, you're looking over your statement, all of this stuff. How much are you actively working on budgeting, and where do you think you can improve?
So yeah, I've worked on budgeting, obviously more recently, as I've said, like with the looming whole grad school thing. That's been like my redundant, I guess, story throughout this conversation so far. Like I said, I feel like now getting into like higher intensity training and like the possibility of the season coming up, I think as athletes, right, we can convince ourselves that like some needs in terms of athletics that are, there should be wants, but we convince ourselves we need them. So I think that's an area I can do better. Like there's certain things like I don't need to have like a really expensive massage. Like there's other things I can do to take care of my body. But at the end of a long week, like I'm tired, like I'm willing to shell out the $150 to get this massage when, maybe I could have saved that and put it into something that is, more cost effective and like aligns with my financial goals. I also think too, right, this is specific to track, and Lauren can relate to this, but finding, meets that are maybe more cost effective if you're putting money up front. Like, yes, we all want to go to meets overseas or meets that are far away from where we're located, but it's like, can we accomplish the same things and have it be, more within our financial goals? Because, when you're trying to make a team and that type of thing, I used to think this way. It's like, oh, I'll just worry about it later. Like I have to go to this meet. Like I'll spend this money and I'll do this, but then later comes and it's like, wow, like that really hurt me for next month. Like maybe I shouldn't have gone to that meet. And so that's, I think, where I can do better, because like athletics is such a big part of my life and I'm investing so much time. So I sometimes justify things that maybe I shouldn't spend money on solely for the fact that like, oh, I'm working really hard for this. Like it's, it's fine. And I'll turn the, blind eye to that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point too about the idea of like balancing what is the most important thing and planning ahead, because as athletes we're ambitious. We want to we want to win every single competition that we compete in, but what if it's $1,500 to this meet and the opportunity is to win 3,000? It's like, okay, that's good, I want to go, I want to compete, do this to get sharp, but the fit's pretty tough, and best case scenario might be like third place, but you're like mentally you're like, I'm gonna win, of course I'm gonna win, I don't show up to lose. And then like you said, you're at the end of the month and you got your third or fourth place, and you didn't break even on that meet, and now you're like, oh man, this wasn't overall a good decision. So But, it's hard to balance, like, when am I investing in myself in some of those instances versus, maybe I should sit this one out because it's not the most cost effective based on what I'm trying to achieve right now.
Yeah, well, Gainbridge has a financial education center on their website. Under building financial capability, you'll be able to find the articles that we've been talking about today, including tips on debt management and building an emergency savings. So, Lauren, I know you love to talk about the emergency savings. Why is it so important that athletes build an emergency savings?
We may have talked about this a time or 10 during the course of this series, but it is truly the foundation of setting your feet to have great finances, to lower your stress levels, to be able to compete without worrying about money. And that emergency fund, especially as we're talking about kind of debt today, is the thing that helps you not get into debt. So we usually recommend that people have 3 to 6 months I recommend that they have 3 to 6 months of their take home pay. So if you're bringing home $1,000 a month, you need $3,000 to $6,000. Some people say of your expenses. Where that gets a little tricky is sometimes people are like, oh, well, my mom pays my cell phone bill. I live with a roommate. And so, my rent's only X, Y number of dollars. And you kind of have, before you know it, have diminish what your expenses are and save very little as a result of that. Well, your roommate moves out and you're on for the whole month of the rent. You need to be able to make sure that you can cover things. And that's why it makes a lot more sense to think about, like, what am I bringing in on a monthly basis, and then multiply 3 to 6%. Now, also for an athlete, I recommend having more than that. 3 to 6 months of, I said percent earlier, sorry, 3 to 6 months of your take home pay is kind of the standard. But with athletes, we also take on additional risk. What if in March, at the beginning of your season, you get injured and the whole season's over? You've lost your whole opportunity to make money, and you still need to cover your bills for the rest of the year, and you don't have the income that you were expecting. In addition to that, you also need to pay for physical therapy to get healthy for whatever the injury was. So it's better if you have 6 to 12 months of an emergency fund set up if you're an athlete. And it's hard sometimes to save that, but it's absolutely worth it, because the alternative is something like that happens, you have no savings, and you want to continue on. And so you swipe your credit card instead. And so now you're stressed out heading into the next season, even though you're healthy, because you're like, I need to do well in this competition so that I can pay off my credit card, get myself back at ground zero, and then start to build.
Gotcha. And so, Mady, when you hear Lauren say this, as an athlete, we want to have 6 to 12 months of an emergency savings fund and then savings on top of that. How does that kind of prepare you for this next endeavor that you're going to have, graduate school and continuing to compete?
Yeah, that's where I really I've been getting everything together for my applications. And that's, I think, was the eye-opening thing of like, okay, not only I have to worry exactly all the things Lauren said about, making sure I have income for if something happens. I do have jobs besides track. So I wish I was a sprinter. When field event athletes, typically we gotta have more, more than one thing. But God did not bless me to run fast, so that's okay. But so yeah, I mean, I do have my job outside of track. So if track's, something, God forbid, should happen, I do have that support system. But it's I mean, even with 2 opportunities to make money, right? It's still, you have to have that same track of thinking, because something could happen, either way. I hate to be like a doomsday prepper, but I feel like, that's probably more beneficial. No one's ever gotten in trouble by being overly prepared. But I do like what Lauren said about, athletes need to double down, because sometimes we feel like, things are going so well, we're like invincible, we're getting into all these opportunities where we're making a lot of money. And when you're in that space, you don't think about, what if I do get injured and lose all of this? And you shouldn't be in that space, right? As an athlete, you should always, have a positive mindset and know everything's going to go your way. But you do have to have, that supporting income for the future, just in case something does come up. So yeah, I've really been thinking a lot more about, saving than I ever have.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love what you said about the idea that no one's ever been mad that they saved too much.
Yeah.
And I actually really good example of that recently. I have a client that was a great saver and has just been stacking money away. And I'm just like, okay, well, what else, the other goals do we have? And it's like, I just want to keep. And so in short order, they decided they wanted to buy a home, and interest rates really high. So what we had previously planned for, their mortgage is going to be higher. So that's going to be helpful. they just found out they're pregnant. So additional expenses that, were not on our original list of things to do. Is like, you couldn't plan for higher interest rates. We don't know what the economy is going to do. People can plan for it, but this wasn't really a planned thing. Now they have this cash, and it's going to be able to help them put us on track and make sure that, they still are able to reach their goals. But yeah, they're definitely not mad that they saved too much.
Absolutely. And Lauren, to dig a little deeper here, how do you encourage your clients or athletes to kind of save a little bit more a month? Is there some strategy that you help them to, motivate them to save a little bit more?
Well, athletes, we like to compete. So one thing I always recommend is like transparency in finances. And, there's a lot of narratives around like not sharing what you earn or not sharing anything about money, but it's really easy to not give your, whole personal financial life away, but to get a challenge with a friend. Because like you said, savings is doing it. So I bet I get more money than you is a good way to start out, or to set a certain goal and, try to achieve that goal. So the same way we go to practice every day to, races or good competitions, we go to good competitions lead to championships. Saving little by little, setting a goal and saying like, okay, I'm going to save $10 a month. It sounds like, oh, this is a waste of my time. And then I'm going to move to $20 a month, and I'm going to move to 30. By the end of the year, I'm going to be saving $100 a month. It's an easy goal to be able to work towards something. The other thing that I always like to recommend is that you automate your savings. So out of sight, out of mind. Get a savings account that's not easily connected so that you can just hit the transfer button when you need or want money. Use a different bank account and put money over there, and then automate it. Every month, $300 goes exactly over there, and you just don't see it. You're looking at your regular bank account, and it's like, oh, this is all I have that's available to me. So out of sight, out of mind, and then find some way to compete and set a goal to be able to reach your savings.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Mady, how does debt, and we've talked a lot about you going back to school and taking on some more debt. How does that decision to take on more debt affect you planning for your future once you kind of graduate school?
Yeah, I think it kind of affects a lot of my choices now, just because, I do think about, and obviously it's going to be a great journey being in PA school and doing all of that stuff. But I also think about like my quality of life during that time. I'm going to be in school all day. It's a very accelerated journey between 2.5 and 3 years, depending on the program. And I'm going to want to have a life during that time, right? If I'm in school all day working really hard, I'm going to want to get my nails done. I'm going to want to go out to dinner, right? So I'm trying to not just minimize, because I also want to have a life now, right? We need to have balance, but I'm trying to maybe instead of going out 2 to 3 times a week, I only go out once a week or once every other week. So I'm trying to just put these experiences away for later when I will really need them and I'm really dying to do something fun. I have a little bit more freedom now to do some things. So that's kind of where that's affecting my decisions down the road. I'm just trying to think about what kind of quality of life do I want to have while, having this debt. And it is something I didn't have to experience in college, not just the debt of being in school, but then also the debt of not being able to work during that time. And people typically don't think about cost of living loans. They just think about the traditional, this is the tuition, this is how much it's going to cost me. But it's like, okay, well, where is the school located? When you start getting into graduate programs, the acceptance rates are very low. A lot of PA programs are under 5%. So as much as I'd like to say, this is my dream school, I want to go here, the likelihood, of an acceptance at a specific school is really small. So then you could be in a city, some programs I'm applying to are on the East Coast. It's like New York City is so expensive to live in. So now the debt becomes, double, triple of what it could be if I got into another program. So I think, I'm just trying to make smart decisions. So I don't have all that extra weight when I'm already stressed by school and having to possibly move. And it's weird to not live so presently, but I know it's, only going to benefit me down the road.
Yeah, I think it's also too about prioritizing. That's really what you're articulating is, it's okay to eat out. It's unrealistic to say I'm never going to eat out again because I'm saving for this, or I'm never going to get my nails done again. But it's also about prioritizing and saying, okay, maybe I can't get my hair done, my nails done, my eyebrows done, get waxed, get lashes, all of the things. Maybe I can pick I really love when I have my lashes. They make me feel good. They make me feel confident. And so I'm going to continue to do that. And, I'll get my nails done monthly or something like that. But you can't say I also am going to buy a Bentley, and just the list goes on and on and on and on and on. There has to be, hey, in my list of priorities, what I'm trying to accomplish is this. And so first, I want to make sure I'm setting enough aside to be ready for school. Second, I want to look pretty and get my eyelashes done. And third is I want to feed myself. That doesn't have to be your list of priorities, but there's a few things you can do. And it's like, well, in the grand scheme of things, how important are these other luxuries that are a part of life?
Yeah, Lauren, you talked about savings accounts, and in Gainbridge's Financial Education Center, there is an article about savings accounts. You talked about automating your savings a little bit. How do you advise athletes just picking the right savings account for them?
Yeah, so this is one that people spend a lot of time on, and I don't think that you should. So in general, a savings account is where you save your money. They're not going to give a whole bunch of interest because it's your cash. It's not being put to work like in the investment market, and savings rates have been, or the interest rates have been really, really crappy for a good bit of time. So that's a good thing when you want to buy something like buy a home. People are buying at 2% interest rates, but it's a terrible thing when you're trying to like earn interest on your savings accounts. The rates are as low as like 0.01%. And you're just like, what? I'm not even getting a penny? Like, this is crazy. But interest rates have now gone back up, and you can get a little bit more. You see in like 2 and 3% as an option, depending on what bank you choose. But you don't want to spend 4 hours of your life looking at 25 different banks to figure out which one is going to give you 1.9% versus 2% of interest on your savings. Because one, is your savings big enough? If you have $200,000 in savings, what is 1 or 2% of that? It can be significant, but also it's probably not significant in the grand scheme of $100,000 or $200,000. 2% would be $4,000 over the course of the year. It's like, ooh, that's not nothing. But also I had to have $200,000 in order to get 4,000. So assuming we're working with numbers much smaller than that, we're going to be getting numbers much smaller than that. Yeah. But there are high yield savings accounts that are really popular, and those are the ones that are going to yield the highest interest rates. You can find a lot of online banks that don't have a lot of extra fees. They don't have, a branch, so they don't have to pay the rent of the branch, the light bills. They don't have to pay the employees at the branch. And that's how they're able to cut costs and give you a much better interest rate. But a regular savings account is totally fine. The main thing is to be thinking about putting money aside and making sure that you're secure for whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Emergency fund first, other savings goes next. And that savings accounts are different than investment accounts. So investment accounts, you want them to get much more earnings than 0.01% or even 1 or 2%. But you first need to have savings before you get over into the investing. So one big piece of this puzzle is do not invest your emergency fund. If you're making $120,000 a year, that's pretty much $10,000 a month. My recommendation is that you have at least 3 months or $30,000 in the bank, 6 months, $60,000 in the bank. If you're an athlete, try to get as close to a whole year in the bank as possible. What I hear all the time is like, well, I got to make my money work for me. I can't just let $30,000 lay around and do nothing. And it feels like that because you're not used to seeing that much money laying around. So it's like when we get to the point that we have $30,000 saved, it's like we got to level up because that was just our emergency fund. We still need to save money into an investment account and above and beyond that. And that's the money that's supposed to be getting to work for you. So don't invest your emergency fund. Stick to the savings accounts. Yes, they have lower interest rates, and it's okay to look around a little bit, but don't waste too much time because also your time is money. Let's say you make $50 an hour at your job and you spend 3 hours looking for a savings account, that's $150 because you were doing this research to go get 0.0% versus 0.02%. Like that wasn't a very good use of your time.
Absolutely. And that's great advice. Mady, you talked about this a little bit in terms of, being a student at USC and kind of managing money during that time period when you weren't really allowed to work because of being on scholarship. How did you manage debt then?
Yeah, that's a great question because I've come a long way. I feel like I've definitely matured. When you get to college and you get a stipend and you live on campus and you have no expenses, there's a dining hall, we get snacks in the training room. Like, gosh, I think back and I'm like, I wish my real life was like our head coach used to joke with us that we were spoon fed and all this stuff. And she's like, when you get to the real world, like you're going to have to bring your own snacks to track meets, all this stuff. And little did I know that was like a greater thing to just life and has more implications than just bringing your own snacks to the track meet. But yeah, I'm not getting off on a tangent, but yeah, I definitely didn't have, great financial literacy when I was, I would say underclass and like freshman, sophomore. And I think that was just because I'm not throwing shade to any USC track teammate of mine. But I think our culture was just that like, wow, we have all this money. Like we go pick up our check every month. So, everyone's getting new shoes when we get our check. Everyone's, going out and doing fun things. We were in LA, things are very expensive. And, we don't have that looming thing of I actually have to take care of myself. It felt like, I'm getting this money just to go blow and do fun things. And that's really not how things work. And I think later on, we weren't allowed to live off campus till we were juniors. And then when we started, now we live off campus, we have rent. So our stipend goes up, obviously, to like accommodate the difference for the housing. I think that's when I started realizing like, okay, my rent eats up a large chunk of my stipend. And then now I'm not really on campus as much. Our dining hall, our athletic dining hall was only like for breakfast and snacks. So now it's like, okay, now I'm buying groceries to have my own dinner now that I'm off campus. So I think in my junior and senior year, I got better with balancing or I guess with like saving and balancing my finances, because I realized, okay, the stipend's not just like to go get a new wardrobe for when we travel and it's, for me to live off of. So yeah, I'll definitely be transparent in that I was buying a Gucci belt my freshman year. I was not using that money to like better my future. I was buying things I probably shouldn't have bought. But you live and you learn. And I was able to save so much my junior and senior years in school that my first year out of college, I trained at the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista. And I was fortunate enough where like I didn't have to have a job my first year out of school when I was training. The training center helped because it lowered like a lot of my expenses, obviously, but I did have some money put aside where I, was the fortunate person. I didn't have a contract and I didn't necessarily have to have a full-time job like so many other athletes do coming right out of school who are in my situation. So I think I appreciated having that money saved up. And so I've kind of learned like, okay, if saving is beneficial, like it really can make an impact on your life, in the future.
Absolutely. Do you still have the belt?
I don't know. Yeah, it's really, I laugh because I sold it on Poshmark like a couple years ago. And I was like, I got, a little return. It was not nearly as much as I paid for it, but I was laughing the whole time. I was like, why did I buy this? There were so many things. I was cleaning out my closet, like so many Jordans that like I don't wear anymore. And I was like, this is, people want to say sneakers are an investment. This is the resale value. No, it's not. That's not an investment. Like your Birkin bag, even though people say that's an investment, like it's not. Like have a real, more stable financial investment. But yeah, definitely. When I was moving too, I was laughing at some of the purchases I made in school because I was like, why did I do this? But I was young, so it's okay. And I learned.
We've all made those mistakes. So thank you for keeping it real with us.
Yeah, for sure.
So to kind of wrap this up, Lauren, what's the best piece of advice you can give to athletes about managing their debt?
I would say to prioritize. So one, be real with yourself. We just talked about, being real. Sometimes the tendency is like, oh, out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to worry about this. I'm just going to pay the minimum payment and, keep focusing on grinding while I, compete so I can earn more money. But you absolutely want to have a plan in place. So prioritizing what needs to be taken care of, what needs to come to the front of the line and what needs to go to the back of the line, and then figuring out how to make sure you get those things paid off. And then also making a plan so that you can take on as little debt as possible when you want to purchase something that you can't afford in full. So whether that's a house or a car, or you're going to take on student loan debt, plan as much in advance as you can so that you can manage this debt and it not become a burden that has you showing up at your field of play saying, I'm only as good as my next jump because I need this jump to pay my rent or to pay the next, the minimum payment on XYZ bill. So prioritize and create a plan.
Gotcha. And Maddie, same question. What's the best advice you can give to other athletes about managing their debt?
Yeah, I love Lauren's advice. For me, I guess it's never let your financial situation come into interfere with your sport. So I've always, this me being super transparent, I've always said if it came to a point where like I'm going to meets because I need to make money to survive, I would stop competing, because that's not what it's about at the end of the day. And when you put yourself in those situations, right? Like the last thing I'm trying to think about at USA's is like, oh my God, I'm going to lose 2K if I don't jump 20 centimeters further right now. Like that's, I work, not just myself, so many athletes, and not just in the sport of track and field. Like Laura and I are specific to that, but so many other sports. Like the last thing you should be thinking about on competition day is doing this because you need to pay your rent or pay, a debt or that type of situation. It should be coming in with the mindset of, I'm prepared for this. These are the competition specific goals I have for myself today. And anything to do with finances should be left out of it. I feel like unfortunately that's not, that is a reality for a lot of people, especially in track and field where we're not making, a ton of money. And I've had conversations with a lot of other, field event athletes where like they have gotten themselves in that situation. And so I guess, yeah, my advice is just like, think about those times. And when you are going out or when you are buying, a new pair of leggings or shoes that you really think you want, like think about those situations where you were really struggling and it was interfering with something that, we work so hard for every single day.
That is great advice. And I just want to thank you both for such an engaging conversation on debt management. I know it probably isn't the most exciting of conversations, but I think we learned a lot from just, how to manage your debt a little bit better, how to build an emergency savings and how to save. And so I appreciate both of you for the transparency and vulnerability and just engaging with this conversation. I also want to thank our sponsor, Gainbridge, a digital platform providing direct access to trusted financial products and free financial literacy education, giving your future a boost. Click on the link to find the articles we talked about today, as well as many more resources on financial education and literacy. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.